You just follow that money, and like all of the conspiracy theories just fall apart because it's just there in front of you in paper. And it was a conspiracy, like 6 dudes in a room conspiring. It's a business plan, and it's a bloody good one, because look what they've created. That the education system is the holy cow, and you've preordained yourself to be the one to certificate this. Right. You're the only one that I can give you a certificate for being a doctor, as long as you follow the curriculum that we've written out for you. And it just so happens that there's only 20 minutes of nutrition education in there, but don't worry about that. And how do you create a monopoly? Well, you make it very hard, right? 4 years of hell. So you get many dropouts. So the ones that are left are truly indoctrinated. And
they want it so bad.
Because of the sunk cost fallacy, and this is the PSYOP. It's like, okay, now you're going to be just basically a prescription writer and a legalized drug pusher for the pharmaceutical companies. Look at this conspiracy theorist, crazy guy sitting here. But that's what happens. And that's just following the money.
Wow, Daniel. Okay. Hello and welcome to You're the Voice. I'm Efrat. I am still in Prague. This is one day after BTC Prague, and I have the biggest pleasure to be sitting here chilling with my buddy Daniel Prince. For those who don't know Daniel Prince, I'm actually happy for you because now you're going to discover a whole new world. So Daniel is the author of Choose Life and the host of Once Bitten Bitcoin podcast. Choose Life is about the tools, tricks, and hacks of long-term family travelers, world schoolers, and digital nomads. And his podcast, Once Bitten, has already 455 episodes.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Do you do them while you sleep? Like,
yeah.
do you not edit anything? You just put it out there? Oh my God.
I edit as little as possible. Yeah.
Well done.
Thanks for having me, and thank you to the team here for this incredible setup. I feel professional.
Right?
Yeah, it's incredible.
It's incredible. Thank you so much for Trezor for hosting us in this brand new studio. I was the first one to launch it a day before the show, and I'm the last one to record a day after the show. I'm sure you're going to have a lot more podcasts being recorded here in the future, but thank you so much. You guys have been so helpful, and the team is amazing. So, Daniel, how was the show for you?
Loved it, as always. Martin and Matthias brought the fire, and the theme last year was, how do we bring like all of these disparate communities together in Europe, especially because you had such great. Germany is such a brilliant, the Einundzwanzig community over there, the 21 million that is in German. I hope please don't test me on my German. And, there's great communities in Spain and in Holland. Arnhem, for example, has been the oldest, 10 years there've been orange pilling merchants and stuff over there. The UK has just suddenly started really exploding with initiatives. There's great French maxis. And Martin and Matthias last year, they wanted to bring all those guys together. Let's share the ideas. Let's get this stuff spoken about. Let's get the ideas on stage. How did you set this up? What were your tools? And get everybody talking, and that went really well, and everybody went off and leveled up, and that this year was the theme: level up. How do we level everybody up again? And I'm sure I leveled up. I'm sure you leveled up. 100%. These guys have leveled up. Look at this, and this is going to enable so many other people now because they're so open to inviting people in to use the studio. That's going to enable people to start their own podcasts in their own languages, and even use the AI tools to translate those into many more, and that's exactly what we need. We need more of this, more education, and that's one thing that a big takeaway from me from this whole last 3 or 4 days, whirlwind conversations everywhere. I got into a conversation with a couple of guys, Rockstar Dev, Pavel and X from BTC Pay, Nicolas Dorier, obviously from BTC Pay, and Mike Schmidt from Brink. And they were talking about, the amount of funding that's out there and available, going to devs, and that's all great. But then the devs have nowhere to go afterwards. There's no jobs in the Bitcoin space. Right. There's not enough companies to hire them.
Right.
And working on Bitcoin Core, obviously we need more people, but that's a really specific kind of personality type. And, where are these devs going once once they've gone through the training and everything, and I guess the worst case scenario is they're going to get stolen away by the siren song into the world of crypto and things like that. So it's interesting to have those conversations, which I'd never been a party to before, and get a look into the other side of things and what's going on. But that got me thinking, and I was sitting down with Avi Burra last night, and I'm sure this is going to resonate with you. I'm like, where's the funding for the educators?
Right.
Where's the funding for the podcasters? Biased opinion. Where's the funding for the writers? Those people that are, taking time out of their day to sit down at night and try and get all of this thing out of their head, off their chests, whether it's an article or a book.
Textbooks.
Fiction books, textbooks in many different languages as well.
Yes.
Plan B Network are doing an incredible job. And I went over to the game show that they were running yesterday. Very primitive, very plebby. Love it. They could need a couple of grand a month. A new podcaster could need a couple of grand a month. The fiction writer, how's he going to get his book edited professionally without his own or her own money? And I think sport as well. There are some great sport initiatives around the world.
Like the soccer teams.
The soccer teams, the real pleb stuff. Josias Carbon, Coach Carbon, he had a ticket to go and play in the soccer tournament in America, $1 million prize. He was going to take a team. He had a team ready, and they were going to go over there, and it was going to be Bitcoin everywhere, and educational leaflets and this, that, and the other thing, get Bitcoin on the main stage. He only needed 20 grand to take that team across for the entrance fee. Couldn't raise it. We couldn't get it going on Geyser, But there's a lot of money out there that is being, I think, just needs rechecking. And again, the artists, how great is the art? And
there is a lot of money in altcoins.
Exactly.
That's annoying.
That's
we need
pure malinvestment.
We need to find a clever way to attract those investors to the right place. It's all about education. So maybe the first people that need funding are the educators.
Yeah.
To pull the investments in.
Absolutely. And that could even be musicians.
Yeah.
Composers, playwrights.
That's a big question that needs to be discussed more. We need to raise that and put that on the table. I fully resonate with that, obviously.
How much of a difference would it make to your life if $2,000 a month came in from a fund?
It would be amazing because I wouldn't have to spend any time discussing with potential partners or sponsors.
Which might go bankrupt or might start rugging their customers.
And then the contracts are temporary.
They're temporary.
Yeah.
And if they rug their customers, you're eternally linked. Your reputation is eternally linked to that company.
Yep.
That and many podcasters have suffered with that in the past.
That's right.
And you've lent into
this.
But
I've got an exception.
With great pleasure, I'd like to introduce my sponsors. They help me fulfill my mission of spreading truth, freedom, and sovereignty. You're the Voice is brought to you by Trezor, the original Bitcoin hardware wallet company pioneering the development of self-custody for crypto assets since 2013, empowering individuals with an open-source device, enabling beginners and experts to easily and securely hold their coins. I find my Trezor super easy to use and recommend it to my friends and family. Enjoy my 5% discount on Trezor products by clicking the link in the show notes and using the code FLAT.
I've got the best sponsor in the world.
All right. with this setup as well.
Yeah.
And this is enabling. It's huge.
Yes.
You can't afford this equipment, Efrat.
No,
I can't afford it. I've got one, two, three cameras, two incredible microphones.
The lighting and everything.
Absolutely.
The studio itself.
Two Chads sitting back here that have given up their morning and their time to come
I
and
don't
help
have
us.
the capacity to do that. Although I did spend a lot of money to make my mini studio at home a little bit better. It's not a Doc Malik kind of studio, but it's still somewhere in between that and nothing. So I spend a lot of money on what I do. And thankfully, I have the capacity to finance myself. I've left a very comfortable, cushy job and high-paying salary for 20 years to finance myself, put that aside. I have the savings. I'm using that. But yeah, we don't get the support, especially not from the audience. Not so much. I mean, I love giving value to people. That's why it's my mission. That's why you and we do what we do. But I feel like people have gotten so used to, YouTube with advertising, Netflix with, big money, the normal shitty mainstream channels, and they just don't think about how this is being enabled. And we don't have Pfizer as a sponsor, or or big pockets of big rich people that want to dictate our agendas. But that's what's good about us. We can stay clean and bring ourselves to the table. But then people have to understand that we also need the support in order to continue.
Yeah, exactly. And value for value, I'm all for it. Bring it on. Exactly. And I love Nick and what Oscar are doing at Fountain. And that maybe that's 5, 6, 7, 8 years away when somebody could come into the space and be supported in that manner. But like you said, it's so nascent, it's so new. I speak to Bitcoiners all the time, and they say, "Oh right, yeah, where can I listen to your podcast?" I'm like, "Yeah, Fountain app." They're like, "Give me a blank look." I'm like,
what is
how do you not know about Fountain app? Yeah. Like, people are very sticky to the Spotify or the YouTube or the Apple Pods. I'm sure it's the same with you. If I look at the very basic information you get back from Spotify, it's like, right, 55% of the people are still listening to you on Apple Pods. They're sticky to that. And yeah, I don't know. It's just an idea.
For those who don't know, Fountain is a podcast app where you can zap the people you love listening to and get value from and give them value back.
Yep.
You can either zap them independently, or while you're listening, you can give them Satoshis. So.
And in some shows, it's even enabled whilst you're listening. You're being paid in sats just to listen.
Yes.
And I think that's an incredible thing. But yeah, give it time. But yeah, on the YouTube channel, people are kind of forced into, once they get X amount of listeners, switch on the ads, right? But then you're interrupting your audience with, you don't know what ad they're going to throw in at the beginning or in the middle or at the end.
Yeah.
And it's clickbait for someone else, and it just completely ruins the message. So yeah, I'm kind of thinking now, this is how do I level up? How do I go out there and make a difference to the other educators and help them and enable them in some way? So that's my takeaway from this weekend.
Wow, that's big and helpful, and thank you for taking that on. And now I would love to ask you to give us a little bit of your background, career background, where have you lived, where are you based today? You guys are like moving around, your family a little bit.
Yeah, sure. So backstory, I grew up in the UK, in the southeast, in Essex. Just did the usual thing, went to state school, then went and studied for some A-levels. And I knew at that time I didn't want to go to university. There was no need for me to further education academically in any way, shape or form. It just didn't suit my personality, I suppose. Excuse me. So I went and found a job, and I found a job in the city of London, which meant an hour and a half commute each way, each day. But that's just what you did. That's what my father did. So, monkey see, monkey do. Found myself working in foreign exchange, of all things, with fiat currencies, which I had no idea of. And I'd even studied kind of economics at school and business studies and that kind of, but it prepares you for nothing. I walked onto the spot dollar mark desk, which was the US dollars traded against Deutschmark, another fiat currency that's gone to zero. Just watched that for over like 3 or 4 years, just completely change in front of my eyes, going from the largest traded currency pair in the world by far to not existing anymore. That did not even raise a question in my mind. And that's crazy now when I've done the full loop where I completely understand what's going on and how the monetary system was set up and why fiat currencies are always going to trend to zero. I saw it. I saw it with my own eyes, and it affected my own career, and it affected my life, and then it affected everything because I had to make changes after that, and that ultimately led me to get a job offer in Singapore. So at the age of 22, my girlfriend and I, we picked up a suitcase each. We were living with our parents still at the age of 22. And this is back in 1999. So even then you were struggling to save, to get out of the family home. And yeah, we got on a plane and off we went to Singapore with the idea of, 2-year contract. Let's see what happens. My girlfriend did not have a visa to live there. So we had to do a bit of a shotgun wedding after 3 or 4 months just to do the paperwork, just to get the visa so she could stay. So that was another huge life moment decision. We're still married. We had 4 kids in Singapore. That was my whole career, like 18 years in that business pretty much. And towards the end of it, I read a book called The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss, which just made it, that was like every page was as if Tim was standing in front of me, kicking me in the balls. Like, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing? And coming to the realization that I was living a deferred lifestyle. That was so powerful to me. And I knew it was true because every morning I would get into my desk, sit down, bend underneath my desk, turn on my computer underneath. I'm just like, what? No, just another 10 to 20.
Neo in the cubicle.
Maybe another 10 to 20 years max, then I'm out. I'm done.
Fuck.
Then I'll be able to play golf.
Oh my
then my wife and I will be able to travel, do whatever we want. The kids will be gone. And that was my fiat mindset, you know? Running on the hamster wheel, forced to run on the hamster wheel. And I must admit, I really enjoyed my career for about 10 years. Then it just started getting just a grind. And, there's a special business to be in. There's a special kind of sociopath that is attracted to the highest corner offices of corporate world, as you know.
Yep.
And dealing with those personalities just drains you.
Yep.
If you're not one of those people, and thankfully I'm not, because these people have personalities that I don't want to ever possess. It all was just too draining. And I suddenly realized, wow, I've got a wife and children at home I never see. I'm a lodger in my own home. This is crazy. And I get to see them at the weekends, but the weekends are just as nuts. Like, we've got to take kids' party over here, then there's a swimming lesson, then there's this, then there's a ballet, then Sunday is like, we've got to make an effort to go and see some friends, but they're like 45-minute drive across the island. But before you know it, it's Sunday night, and you've just fallen into your dip on the sofa with this dread of the alarm clock going off at 5:45 the next morning. And I wanted to change that. So we did, and that was the book that really gave me the confidence to do it, because then I started looking around. The biggest stumbling block for us, the biggest barrier to entry to quit was, one, that conversation is very difficult to have, and a lot of empathy for people that are, they've painted themselves into a corner of a career. If you want to get out of it, you got to face your boss in the morning with that letter and have that conversation. And then you've got to have the steel to get over the fact that they're probably going to offer you a wage increase on the spot just to keep you. And then you're going to go through all of this in your mind, like, okay, should I stay? Because now maybe it's just 5 years. And all of these traps that are set up to keep you exactly where you are. So the other thing was kids, 4 kids, aged 8, 6, and 2 3-year-old twins. What's that going to look like? If I quit my job and I can't provide for them because I'm not going to have a wage, how long are my savings going to last? Am I going to end up going bankrupt? Are we all going to end up living under a bridge? All of this nonsense stuff that goes on in your head when you're facing down these big, big moments in your life. And of course, education, because we've been gaslit into believing the best thing you can do for your children is to send them to the best possible school that you can find or afford. And again, we're making economic decisions, as we all know now as Bitcoiners, economic decisions every second of every day. And the big ones are kids' education. And people actually, they will move to certain places in their own country to get into these sphere of influences, so they're close enough to that school, so then they can even apply to that school, or you just end up paying ridiculously high private school fees for just a fluffed up bit of education that they would have got anyway at the state school. So, okay, how do we address this? If we take them out of school and start traveling, what's that going to look like? And that's when we fell into the rabbit hole of challenging our beliefs over education, and we found Sir Ken Robinson's TED Talk, which he delivered in 2006, and it's titled "Do Schools Kill Creativity?" And it's still the most downloaded TED Talk of all time. And that was, okay, wow, penny drop. And then you get led into all of these other different areas. John Taylor Gatto, Peter Gray, and other people that have, even Rothbard has written a book about education. It's called Education, Free and Compulsory. And it's a short book. I recommend everybody, especially if they're Bitcoiners and Austrian economists, to go and read that book. And we just built up the confidence to, okay, actually, this is not going to damage our kids. This is not going to hold them back. This is not going to, make them unsociable, weirdo misfits. All of the opposite seems to be the truth, because when you find the other families that are doing this and read their blogs, this is what we were doing. It was 2013 that we were doing this and trying to find the information. And I found a blog post from a young girl, Hannah Miller. I'll never forget it. She was 13 when she wrote the blog post. The most incredible thing I ever read. And I thought, wow, like if a 13-year-old kid can be this funny, this satirical, and, be able to write this blog post and have the, confidence to put herself out there and publish this thing. And I get to read it like as an adult in Singapore whilst I'm going down all of these dark, weird decisions. And this 13-year-old has just smashed so many of my misheld common beliefs. It's like, well, I want that for my kids. And that's what really started to free us. We took them out of school. We sold everything we owned. And we started to travel, and we didn't know how long we'd go for. And that ended up to be almost 3 years.
Wow.
And that's what the book is about, Choose Life, going through those decision-making processes. What were the tools and tricks that we found? And,
How many different places did you visit on those 3 years?
I think around 17.
Wow.
Different countries. And the trick for us was to home swap.
Right.
So if I back up to 18 years ago when our first daughter was born, and I was still very much ensconced in the corporate world, life, it changes completely, as you know, when you have children. Everything changes, physiologically. But then when you're projecting out into the future, it's like, right, okay, what should we do? Because I'd had some savings up at that point. I'm like, property, that was like, we should have a property. If at the very least, if not in Singapore, somewhere that we can call our own and perhaps use as a store of value,
right,
and find some leverage with and put it in rental pools and all of this kind of stuff. And so we bought an investment property in Koh Samui at the time in Thailand, because the exchange rate was like crazy in our favor. And that's what we did, and we still own that place today.
Wow.
But we had no idea that come 2014, home swapping was a thing. And we fell into this little circular kind of sharing economy style thing, which was really taking off. And digital nomads was becoming a thing as well. And we listed that property on the, it was called lovehomeswap.com. And Debbie, who founded that company, she started it after she went on a family holiday with her 2 children. She was a single mother. And she watched The Holiday, the film with Cameron Diaz and Kate Winslet in. She come back and started a company, and that was that.
Wow.
And so we were one of the first, I don't know, few thousand people to list on there. And it just slowly grew and grew and grew. But you form this community based on trust.
Yeah.
And where people would swap their homes. I'm like, man, like, this is crazy. This just drove our biggest expense down to zero. And what we thought we might be able to do for 6 months, we ended up doing for 3 years. So we home swapped into...
So every time you came back to your house and then you went to another place?
We would just bounce.
Wow.
Yeah, because
and then people would just like be in your place, lock it up, leave the keys.
Yeah.
The next people come in and...
Yeah, exactly. Well, there was a guy on site that manages like the 20 properties. So he's there just to make sure everyone's cool.
Great.
And can hook them up to like, where's the supermarket, where's this, where's that.
Great.
Hand the key, take the key back, and all that kind of thing. Okay, home swap request comes in for Australia, Christmas 2014 to 2015, like Sydney, Australia, right next to the park, terrace house, like 4 bedrooms. You're like,
Wow.
who wants to go to Sydney for Christmas? I'm like, yeah, hands up everywhere. Like, okay, so we accept that swap and make it happen. And then we're like, right, okay, let's craft the itinerary now from that. How long can we stay in Australia as Brits? I think it was 2 or 3 months. I can't remember exactly. okay, we can just hang in Australia for 2 or 3 months. So then we said, okay, what's our nearest point of entry? Perth. Then we found a home swap. Perth, Melbourne, Sydney, and we hung out there for 2 or 3 months. Then whilst we're there, we're like, okay, we're here now. New Zealand's just there. Why don't we go to New Zealand? Because otherwise it's the arse end of the world. So we made plans to go to New Zealand. We stayed in New Zealand for 3 months. We did do some what you call woofing. Are you familiar with that?
No.
It's like work on organic farms.
Oh, yes, I am familiar with it.
Right, okay. So we found some of those opportunities. When we couldn't find the home swap, we would always find value for value.
Yes.
You know, I'll work on the farm in the morning. Do you have a roof over our heads?
Housing, yep.
Absolutely. So one of those particular farm stays, my wife and I were getting up at 5:30 in the morning to go and milk 300 cows in New Zealand in our overalls and whatever else, like just thrown in the deep end. And you'd get in this pit, and the cows would get walked in, and you had the suction things, and like, this is how you do it. You had like a 3-minute lesson from the farmer, and you better be quick because they come in and then out again, and they slap them on the bum, and out they go in the next lot. And it would take about 2 hours each morning to do that.
That's amazing.
And but then we would get to drink the raw milk.
That's amazing.
Yes. And so we learned a lot doing all of these different experiences. And the kids would just be asleep, right, in the house, and we'd get back. It'd be 7:30, breakfast time. So we spent 3 months in New Zealand. Then from New Zealand, we flew to San Francisco, and we spent 3 months between the US and Canada doing all kinds of different things, wherever we could find the home swaps.
Amazing.
And so you'd either find the cheap flights or you'd rent a cheap car. You could even find car sharing options and things like that. Some home swaps even gave you the key to the car. And it was just an incredible way to travel. And then to name some other companies, Croatia, Switzerland, Spain, France, England. We even went back and home swapped through our own country. My wife and the kids had never lived there. And so we showed them the UK.
Wow.
And it was an incredible adventure. And we still home swap to this day. We were at the Freedom Forum Oslo conference. We home swapped.
Wow.
So to get to the conference there and back, it was a 45-minute ferry ride across the fjord. Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Mm-hmm. Like, everybody else is just rolling out of their beds, down to the hotel for breakfast, to the conference center. You're not seeing anything.
Yeah.
Unless you actually, maybe you bought a ticket to go and do a day trip, but people don't. You get, ensconced in that. You're in the conference vibe, and everything is energy, energy, energy. You just have a different experience. And the people we were home swapping with were just staying with their parents around the corner, so they just got out of their house, gave us the keys, come and showed us, this is how you work the dishwasher, this is how you do this. Oh, very much. That supermarket's the best. This restaurant's the best. Go for a walk down here along the beach, and so you get to travel in a completely different way.
That's fucking unreal. So some of those adventures are in your book.
Yeah.
I haven't read it yet. And I need to grab one.
Yeah.
Okay. Amazing, amazing. And you never went back to fiat life. And when did you decide that you're starting the podcast and going on that trajectory?
That's another funny thing about going back to fiat life. Because we had checked out, and then, of course, like always happens, 6 months later you get a job offer, which was going to pay you way more than you'd ever been paid before. It happens all the time. Mm-hmm. And people, that's another stumbling block for people. You think you're going to lose so much, but all of these fears are just locked up in your mind.
Of course.
And so we went, let's go and have the discussion. Mm-hmm. And it was in Dubai. So we found a home swap in Dubai because we were still traveling, so we could do it. We had the time. We went over there, met the guy, and he explained the job and whatever else. And I'm like, my wife was, right, this another 5 or 10 years, this could. I'm like, how are we falling back into this trap? I'm like, I hear what you're saying, but no way. I just don't have it in me. Like this is why the book's called Choose Life, because you come to the realization, I've chosen life now. And people would say, come on in, Dan, when are you coming back to real life? Mm-hmm. When are you going to stop all this crazy stuff and get back to real life? I'm like, I've never felt more alive, more free, more
Same, yeah.
real
Yeah.
than I do now. So no, I didn't go back to fiat life. And going down the rabbit hole of unschooling, world schooling, because obviously we were doing that practically, I found as well Bitcoin. And the reason I found Bitcoin was because I needed a store of value. I didn't want to go back to work. I thought I'd done all the right stuff. I'd worked in finance, right? I had my equities. I had some fixed income stuff. I had some silver bars in a storage safe in Changi Airport somewhere, you know, all good, you know, that will moon one day, you know, of course, precious metals, mixed commodity funds and all of this. I diversified all of the things. But of course, they weren't performing, and
the money's losing value, and you don't want to become poorer.
Exactly.
You want to save what you have.
And what I did have, what I had taken control of, again, accidentally, not understanding the power of it, I had control of my time. It was mine.
Yeah.
For the first time in my life since the age of 5.
Right.
Because at the age of 5 in the UK, you get shoved over the threshold of the state education system, and then you're theirs, and they own your time.
Right.
They tell you when to sit, when to stand. They tell you what books to read and what not to read, more importantly.
What to eat.
Exactly. And I was like, wow, okay, what am I going to do with this time? And fortunately, I know, is there such a thing as luck? Who knows? I had become friends with Grant Williams before we left Singapore. And Grant was the co-founder of Real Vision. Raoul Pal and Grant founded Real Vision back in 2014, I think. And I must have been one of the first 10 to 100 subscribers of that, just to show support. And I was totally interested in what they were doing, because they had long-form interviews with all of these hedge fund managers that had been the other side of all of the big foreign exchange trades that I had been brokering in my career. But I couldn't reach these guys, because sitting between the brokers and the big hedge funds that were moving the most money around were the banks. The hedge funds had to come to the banks to get the price. Then the banks would capture that business. Then they would come to the marketplace, the brokers, to offset their positions. So that's how all of that kind of weird world works. With all of this freshly printed money that gets thrown around in a system. And by the way, nobody knows what they're moving around. It's just insanity.
They take it for granted.
Yeah, absolutely. And everyone's just so busy because, you know, it's highly stressed.
No one stops to ask.
No.
Yeah.
Incentivized not to.
Yes.
And so I was watching all of these videos, interviews. I'm like, this, like, you know, leveling up. I'm like, wow, this is incredible. But still in fiat world, where I was like, okay, so perhaps I need to trim that position here and move that over here and da-da-da-da, losing sleep over it and just going through all of this pain and stress of trying to figure out how can I just protect what I've earned.
Exactly the same process, yes.
Right?
Yep.
And then I remember seeing Grant in Singapore. We'd gone back to Singapore for a friend's 40th birthday, and I caught up with Grant, and I'm like, when are you guys going to start talking about like Bitcoin? Have you ever considered that? Because I'd poo-pooed it several times before. And I actually remember the Mt. Gox hack and like the front pages of some of the newspapers that were left on our desks. Oh, well, that's the end of that. Internet
Mt.
magic.
Gox is an exchange, for those who don't know. Like
Exactly.
Was it the first or the...
I don't know if it is officially the first, but yeah, one of the first
exchanges.
And it was
people
based out of Japan.
Bitcoin. Okay.
And yeah, it was hacked and people's funds were stolen. To me, I didn't do any further investigation. I thought, okay, well, that's the end of Bitcoin Inc.
Okay, that's
whoever
dodgy.
those guys were.
Yep.
Yeah, I thought it was a company that was running this Bitcoin internet money.
Okay.
And that was the level of research I'd done up until that point.
Right.
Yeah. And CEO's going to prison now. And so should he. Yeah, I spoke to Grant because he still hadn't died. And I'm like, oh, right, yeah, I thought that was over. I thought it was bankrupt. I thought that was gone. He's like, no, we're going to run some interviews on it. And sure enough, and they run a series called The Chain, if I'm not mistaken. And on came like an interview with Wences Casares. And I'm like, wow, I've had this all wrong. Like, I couldn't have been more wrong. And then I remember seeing an interview with Tura Demista, who I was chatting with last night. And I always remind him of this. I'm like, Tur, you don't know how much I owe you because you really just pushed me into the rabbit hole. And then Trace Mayer, I watched an interview with him, long form, when Trace was fire, just unbelievable information. And there was no going back for me. I just had to find more.
Yeah.
You know what I got? I got that I needed to know more about this thing. That's what I got.
That's the little crack you needed.
And then I found Andreas. And,
and that was the end of it.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. And that journey lasted, I guess, 5 years until it got to the point where, like you.
So did you gradually move your assets into Bitcoin?
Yeah.
When you start, as you were learning about it?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Gradually.
Because you got more confident?
Exactly. You have to build conviction over time.
Exactly.
And I still hadn't grokked it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm glad I did it this way. There are differing opinions out there. American Hodl, I love you, brother. Yes, people should be stacking as hard as they fucking should. But I didn't. I had a different mindset, and I slowly kind of dollar cost averaged my way in. And with that came further conviction. And as the years progressed, so did the messaging.
Right.
So did the articles. And so did the books that, finally started dropping. Well, Dom Frisbee dropped his in 2013, but I missed it. I didn't see that one. And it wasn't until I picked up the Bitcoin Standard 2018, Why Buy Bitcoin by Andy Edstrom about the same time, Knut's book. It's like, wow. Gigi's articles. I'm like, what? This is crazy. And
it's like the punches you got from the 4-hour work week, but now...
all over again.
Yeah, all over again.
Yes. And I must confess, in the 2017 crazy times, I got caught up because I still hadn't de-fiated myself, and I got caught up in exchanging some Bitcoin for some Ethereum, some Litecoin, some Dash, and thinking I was a genius because, again, I'm diversifying, can't have all my eggs in one basket, and I'd better make sure I catch the rise on these things. And it was the siren song of CEOs. It's like, oh, wow, right, okay, because I still hadn't grokked Bitcoin properly. Conviction was growing, but it hadn't all just completely, all the pieces of the puzzle were still scattered.
Yes.
And I would get, I would find myself watching interviews with like Ryan Taylor, for example, from Dash, thinking, well, yeah, this guy's ex-finance, this guy's a CEO, this guy's, saying all the right things. Wow, he's answering my emails. I could never have done this, holding a Tesla stock or something. This was something I felt included, and it's all just a real trick. And so I lost some money on the shitcoining, which I gave up eventually, which many people do.
I'm starting to feel I'm the only one that never had any shitcoin.
Good. You found the right content.
Never.
That's amazing. And that is the goal of our work, right? To save people from losing too much money on their journey. And then I started the podcast in 2020.
Wow.
And I was the killer moment for me was meeting real Bitcoiners in real life, because I had been procrastinating for months and months.
When was the first time you met real Bitcoiners in real life?
January 2020.
Where?
First of all, in between, about an hour and a half away from where I live, just a random chance Bitcoin Twitter meeting.
Okay.
And like, wait, what? Where you live?
Like
what,
a made up?
Well, this guy I'd been following for a while,
Yeah.
and shout out to Hodler Than Thou, and really liked what he was saying. Retweeted some of his stuff, and then he said something about what he was doing, something about his son, and I just retweeted, right, Dad of the Year right here, and he DM'd me, and we just started chatting. We live an hour and a half away from each other, not even an hour. Like,
okay.
I'm like, dude, we're meeting. So that was the first time, just in a random restaurant, like crepe place in France, and sat there, and you know what it's like, you can't stop talking.
Yeah.
And I come away so energized, and we've been sharing ideas, what can we do? How do we get to more people? Because here we are in rural France what should we do? And he went on and started 21ism, which was like an online zine full of like really great interviews and visuals and celebrating the cultural side of Bitcoin. And then I went to London with my oldest daughter. She was 14 at the time. She'd been going to school in France, so she wanted to go and learn the other language. So did the other kids, but the other kids went into school and then come back out. She's like, no, I'm good with this. So she actually, out of the four, she went through more of a formal kind of process.
Yeah.
And she had to do like a 1 week stage internship. So I called up a friend of mine who had a company in the UK. And at the age of 14, she was making sales calls and building websites and working with adults for the whole week. So while she was out all day, 9 to 5, I had a week where I was just on Bitcoin Twitter. Yo, who's in London? And I found two guys. And I went on a podcast because one of the guys was a podcaster. And that was the Bit by Bit podcast. And he was my second Bitcoiner that I met in real life, and we just sat down to a 3-hour conversation.
Grilling it.
And his girlfriend thought he was crazy. He's like, what do you mean you're inviting strangers to our home? What are you going to talk about? He's like, Bitcoin and stuff. Like, so he's now got 2 kids, and shout out, he's doing great work. And then I met Checkmatey. I don't know if you follow Checkmatey. He does all the analysis on Bitcoin Twitter.
Yes.
And in a pub, because he answered the rally cry on Twitter, and we stood there. I think we probably ordered 1 drink each and just stood there with it like blah 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 blah. And I knew at that point, right, that's enough's enough.
You're in the right place.
I started the podcast at the end of January 2020, and then we were locked down by March. And I thought, oh man, this is going to be difficult. That's, again, stupid thought, because now everybody had time. Everybody I was DMing to come on the show was just a default yes.
Amazing.
And that's where it all started kind of picking up.
Yep.
And then what the show is known for is the fact that my daughter asks the first question.
I love that.
And there's a story behind that.
Why is it just her? Because you have more kids.
I do. They've all appeared at some stage.
Okay.
We were sitting having dinner. And now all of a sudden, Dad's a podcaster, like whatever. And I'm eating dinner very, very quickly. I've got a podcast at 9 o'clock. I'm sorry, I've got to get going. I don't want to be late. And it was Andy Edstrom, and I wanted to talk about Why Buy Bitcoin because I loved the book. And Lauren just said, well, can I come in and ask a question? And I'm like, yes, absolutely. I would love for you to ask a question. So Andy comes up on Zoom, and Lauren's on my lap, and I'm pretending to read her Why Buy Bitcoin as a bedtime story. Uh-huh. And Andy thought it was very funny. I'm like, Andy, we're going to mix this up. She's going to ask you the first question. He's like, right, let's go. And that's the shtick of the show. It's just
a great format.
She's been on probably at this stage, out of the 450, at least 400 episodes.
Wow.
And what I love about it is, it might be a stock question that she asks, but the person we're asking it to, they can't give the stock answer. They've got to redefine their messaging.
That's right.
To 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 that she is now.
Which is the best.
Yep.
Because they're simplifying it.
Yep.
They're bringing the essence of it without fluffing it.
Absolutely.
I love that.
And like you said, 450 episodes later, and I'm looking forward to the next 450.
Well done. I envy you. Okay, I want to be Daniel Prince when I grow up. Let's talk a bit about being awake in the Bitcoin community, what people call based, right? Mm-hmm. That's a new term for me. I didn't know it. I knew I was like awake. I didn't know I was based. But now everyone's like, she's based AF. And I'm like, what is based AF? Okay. Based as fuck. Oh, great.
Yeah.
Got it.
You like that?
Yeah.
I like it
it's
too.
It's cute. I meet a lot of Bitcoiners in many different places around the world. I must say that out of all communities or groups that I was part of, in terms of ratio, there is the highest ratio of more aware, more awake people in this community than anywhere else I've seen, and I love it. at the same time, the amount of people I see in this community which has already woken up to one big massive lie, which is the fiat money lie, is not really understanding a lot of the other lies that exist in the world. And there I stop and ask myself, why is it when you discover one thing and understand that the system is not necessarily designed in your favor to benefit you and your life, you then don't become suspicious that maybe other systems that you are part of are designed in the same way?
Yep.
Why do you take everything for granted? Why do you not stop and ask? Because you've already become a more critical person that asks questions. Why don't you do that on other areas of your life? Why do you stop there? And I do know that people have fear, and I understand the cognitive dissonance and everything. I just want to get your thoughts and your take about... and I don't have a complaint, obviously. I understand that everyone has their own pace and journey. And, you know, just like you were saying before about, you know, I was working in that industry for so long. It was in front of my face. How did I not see it? You were just not ready. You were not ready on probably many different dimensions and levels, probably spiritually, mentally, emotionally, maybe not even maturely enough to handle what is going to come. At the same time, I still want to be a bit critical and say maybe they're complacent when they find Bitcoin. They're like, oh, okay, I found Bitcoin. Here's a solution for all the world's problems.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I hear exactly what you're saying. I've had 2 interventions this weekend.
With people you know well?
Yes.
Okay.
And I love them.
Or did you shake them up?
You know, the interventions come from a place of love. That's what you got to. That's where you have to understand, and concern.
For sure.
And
Love and compassion. We don't do that in a way to scare people off.
No. And one of them was, I don't know if you ever saw, I was doing like a short story tweet. It wasn't a thread, but like it would just be like a short story. Wilhelm Reich founded Orgone Energy.
Yes.
In 19 whatever, he died suddenly in a prison cell the day before he was to be released.
I saw that. I loved it. Yeah. Keep
And
going.
then a short story, you know, all of these things
Yes.
where died suddenly, you know,
Yes.
in the past. The guy that discovered that you could run, you know, like John Galt, basically, could run an engine for as long as, and was invited to dinner to meet some people and then run out and told his brother they poisoned me and died in front of his, you know, a short story. All of this kind of stuff. Willard Krell, a short story, deepest research on niacin, vitamin B3, given all of the utilities he could ever have, you know, wished for, taken from Germany to America. Never saw his research again. You can't find anything about him on the internet. You know, all of this kind of stuff. And a friend came over and he's like, you know your short story tweets?
They're a bit
I'm
scary.
like, yeah. He's like, please reconsider doing that. I'm
Because
like,
it makes you look like a conspiracy theorist?
he was truly afraid for my safety.
Okay.
That was where it was coming from.
Okay.
He's like, you know, don't stick your head too far above the parapet because, you know, we need you in the fight. And so that was one. And then this morning was like, dude, like the contrail thing, like the lines in the sky stuff.
Oh, hi.
You got to stop. Like, you just, it's, you know, there's nothing there. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I hear what you're saying. But believe me, I've done a lot of research into it. And in fact, it was one of your articles. And, you know, touch points, right? Bang, 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 bang. How many times am I going to ignore this when I'm seeing the signals and I can see it in the sky myself? And I'm open enough to go do my own research and not just, you know, put it to a side. And there are knee-jerk reactions to, you find Bitcoin, then everything's a lie. Yeah. Everything's a lie, and I'm just going to be, you know, contradictory towards absolutely everything. And Giacomo was talking about this as well. Like, you see a headline, and you're like, right, okay, and you see everybody else is doing this, and you're like, well, that's obviously all bullshit. I'm going to do the complete opposite, just to be a contrarian. There's some of that going on.
Yes, there is.
For sure.
On the edges, you always get.
Absolutely. But I come at it from, rather than everything being a lie, everything's a half-truth. And that's way more damaging. And that's where the psyop is. Because the half-truth is planted. And then it's your job as a functioning adult, as an economic making machine that we are, as we discussed earlier, every second of every day, it's your job to kind of like sift through those half-truths and figure out where the truth might lie. And you're not going to be right every single time. But then you get to a certain point of conviction where you're like, actually, it was Jack Cruz I had on my podcast.
I listened to that episode. It was a good episode.
We were going through the whole thing, and Lauren asked him, if you remember, why was your TED Talk banned? And that threw him straight into the conversation, and that was amazing to, get that. I don't think anybody had asked him about that before. We just went through all this different bouncing around all over the place, and his thing, obviously, is about light. And then he said, we're being down-engineered as human beings through all of this kind of like EMF, blue light that is all around us all of the time, daylight being like the most critical thing that you could get, and we're even under attack there. And I remember saying to him, like, wait, hang on a minute, are you talking about the lines in the sky right now? He's like, yeah, we are. I'm like, holy shit. Like, so he described like the silver iodide, and I think there's a third, I don't know the exact chemical compound for it, but I'm pretty sure it's silver iodide that's used to, spread out slowly or seed the clouds, and it's weather warfare basically, because you're making it rain in certain places, which
it's many different chemicals, by the way.
Yeah,
it's bromide, aluminium.
Which I found out after reading you and hanging out in a few of our little circles. And when you, again, Efrat, when you see it, you can't unsee it.
Yeah.
And so people, all you have to do is look up at the sky.
Yeah.
Some days. Yesterday morning, did you notice?
Here?
In Prague.
I didn't notice.
I arrived with Giacomo and Mia because he was first on stage and I had the MC duties in the morning. And we got out of the car and I'm like, oh man, look at that. It was all over. The grid patterns and whatever else. And Giacomo was like, yeah, I've seen your tweets about it. Like, you're kind of down that rabbit hole. I'm like, man, it's wild. He's like, I've not had the time to look into it. He didn't just completely dismiss it and like roll his eyes.
He's a super open guy, so yeah.
And then sure enough, 2 hours later, it was complete blanket, and
And then it was raining as well.
How did you get switched on to
on
it?
this specific one, or in general?
In general, and then why that specific one?
Well, in general, it was COVID. And seeing through the lies, because I'm a marketeer and I've been in marketing for 20 years. When they all started around, I watched some CNN and some other overseas channels, and while I was still watching TV in 2020, and I was like zapping between the channels when COVID started, and here I am seeing the same messaging points in every fucking channel around the world. How come they're all lockstepping? How come they're all saying the same thing? As a marketeer, I know that if this is happening, it's planned. It's a campaign. They're all rolling out a campaign at the same time. So I started following it and to try and understand what the messaging points are. I was a little bit scared at the beginning. They got to me as well, but I obviously never did any of the bullshit. I did put a mask for a little bit until I realized it's bullshit. But then I realized that they're all saying the same thing, trying to get people to give up their rights. In Israel, it was very strict at the beginning. They didn't want us to leave the house. They allowed us to go protest 100 meters away from our house. And I was like, hold on. If I can go 100 meters away from my house, I can go anywhere. What's the difference? And then the Supreme Court approved that that's a violation of our freedom of movement, and they wouldn't allow the government to do that. So we were allowed to go protest wherever we wanted. So I always had a flag in my car, and I was always on the road to go protest, even when I wasn't, to just go the hell wherever I wanted. And I did protest at the time, but I realized that it's all a theater. It's all a joke. And then I said, okay, and it continued, right? COVID just showed me how many different tricks and charades they can pull off, and how many things people will eat for breakfast without asking any question, and then another thing comes and another thing comes and no one's questioning anything, and people just like following everything and so scared, and I'm like, what the fuck is happening? And then at my workplace, I was still a CMO at the time. I was the only person in the company that didn't take the jab, but I was also the only one in management. We were 8 people in management that they started talking about what is about to happen. They're going to roll out vaccines. Are you guys going to take it? Everyone's like, yeah, of course we're going to take it, because then we can start moving around freely and going overseas and doing all that stuff. And they get to me and it's like, you're going to take it, right? And I'm like, no. And they said, why? I said, why would I? What is there? Look at me. Do I look sick? Do I need help? I'm fine. I'm young. I'm healthy. I don't need anything from anyone. And I don't need to talk to you about my health choices either. And that escalated with time. There were many bumps that
Israel.
I got along the journey, and I had to face each one very courageously and just keep saying, fuck off. I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do that. So COVID started it. And then when I realized that they can violate my bodily autonomy, which is, I think, the most sacred thing we have in our lives, just as I'm saying, I can then take it to the next area in my life and say, if they've done it on my body, next they'll do it on my property or my money. So I need to learn about money. And I did. I started learning what fiat is and how the system is designed. I actively looked for like docos or books to teach me what money is and how it works. I heard a bit of David Icke saying people don't know what money is. They don't even question it. It got me thinking. COVID just really opened my mind to start thinking about things, to start questioning everything. And then when I realized how money works, I was lucky again. Is there such thing as luck? That one of my followers on Twitter that have seen all the work I was doing during COVID, because I didn't just speak out in my company. I spoke out on Twitter and everywhere. Hardly anyone in Israel was talking, and not many people, definitely no one in the tech community in Israel. Everyone's like so woke. And anyway, so I was like the only one. So he was following me, and he came over to my office. He said, listen, you're so ready. You're so red-pilled. You get everything. Now's your time to be orange-pilled. I need to tell you about Bitcoin. I'm like, thank you. I was waiting for someone to teach me about Bitcoin. Please do, because I didn't have time. And he sat with me and he explained to me. I got it. I mean, I got the beginning, again, the crack. And then he gave me the Bitcoin standard. And then he helped me do my first transaction. And that was it. And then I kept going on my own, okay? And now I'm doing my own thing. So, I was already creating content before, but now I'm going to formalize it. I'm going to start my podcast. I'm going to write more. I'm going to be part of a publication in Israel, a newspaper that is not censored, and many other things that I started doing. And that was amazing, because the moment I took that decision and decided that I'm opening myself up to creating content professionally as a profession, life just aligned with me, and I'm never going back. It's amazing. And I'm a completely different person today than I was before. And everything that comes over to me, every new topic, every new area, every new person I meet that brings some interesting angle or topic or subject, I am open to it. I want to learn. I want to know. It doesn't mean that I'd necessarily agree with everyone or take what everyone has to give me, but I've developed such a good muscle in critical thinking that I'm not afraid to tackle anything. I may not have time to go down every rabbit hole, but I'm okay understanding that area is still not clear for me. I need to go revisit that later, or I want to go deeper on that, like chemtrails, for example. Yeah, so that's, sorry for taking so long.
No,
out
that's
of your
great.
podcast,
No.
your stage.
That's amazing, because I didn't know that full story, and I know how
Yeah.
crazy Israel was,
very
because there was
crazy.
another Bitcoiner, Ben, from, he created Spectre Wallet, and he was tweeting a lot. And
During COVID.
Yeah. He started writing like the Clown World newspaper just to try and raise awareness. And,
Right.
and yet, back to your point, if you think about, how many years ago was the hashtag Me Too thing, which, what was the extra tagline that came with that? My body, my choice. Everyone Forgot about that in an instant.
Oh, yeah.
This is crazy.
Yeah.
We went from one end of the spectrum to the other like that. And nobody's asking questions. And if people would challenge me, I'd be, it's my body, my choice. Do we not use that hashtag anymore?
Yeah.
When was that benched?
Yes.
And
Yeah, it was crazy. It was clown world on steroids. I don't think it never went away. They're continuing their health agendas, obviously. Clearly, I talk about that too, the WHO and everything.
Yeah.
It was the first real big successful test that they did to humanity. And they succeeded on many levels to tame humanity, to manage to manipulate humanity in such a way that they would accept harsh violations of human rights. And now they're going to continue. And next we're going to see that happening with our freedom of movement with the 15-minute cities in the UK. We're going to see that with digital identity, so that you have to be identified in front of the state in every fucking step you do. And then CBDC is just the perfect mechanism to then control what you do or not do with your freedom of movement and freedom to transact. Yeah, we're going down a very dark path if we don't start to open our minds up to what's happening here and learn how we can protect ourselves and our families.
And now we have this Ozempic thing, which like this injection that you can take that to stop you being fat. Like, it's unbelievable. And Jack talked about that on my podcast as well. It's like, you watch, give it 3 or 4 months at time that we recorded.
Yeah.
This is going to start being rolled out like aggressively in the UK. So you got that. You also have coming the mRNA cancer jab.
Yes.
And people are going to believe it all again.
Yes, and you have Pfizer buying a cancer treatment company for about $40 billion. Not long ago they bought them. I forgot their name. So they acquired a company to try and treat cancer because Pfizer, how conveniently with mRNA. So we have the fiat cycle manifested in big pharma. You know, you just have to keep growing that beast. And not that the pharma didn't bring good stuff to our lives. Obviously, I'm not like on the extreme end. It's all bad. Like you said, there's half truth, right? There's some things that are good, some things that have brought real progress to humanity, but some things that are really like killing us.
I'm sure. Have you had Texas Slim on the show before?
No.
So he's the best one for this because he calls it the medical, pharmaceutical, agricultural complex.
Yes.
And then you see the whole cycle.
Yeah, they're all related.
Yep. Because the food, even down to the seed, and he did go deep. He went out on harvest. I remember the Harvest of Deception was his first article, which I read. And I'm like, man, I got to get this guy on the show. And we did like a 3-part series because he was writing this blog. And he went out on harvest and figured out, the whole process of, what you're growing, why you're growing it, what the hell are you growing this shit for? Because this is like inedible. And this, he was calling
And
foul
what's the
on
origin
rapeseed.
of the seed? Is it genetically modified?
Of course it is. And by who?
Yeah.
Monsanto and
Exactly, and that's the
Cargill
bigger
and,
picture. And then I follow Vandana Shiva, and she talks about the origins of seeds and how Monsanto has taken over this industry. And oh man, this is
we got to get back to heirloom seeds. And can we?
Yeah.
I don't know because are you aware of this like huge freaking seed bank that they've got?
Yes.
Have you seen it?
Yes.
It's like that is literally a building out of James Bond film.
Yes.
And that's where all the seeds are.
Yes.
To protect us. And they're not heirloom. They're like these GMO lab-grown seeds, which are the crops. He'll explain to you. The farmers are planting this shit because they're subsidized too. Where do those subsidies come from? Well, government, right? Well, no, because the government don't have the money to give. So it comes from above. So the lobbyists. So who's lobbying?
NGOs. And
Absolutely, all of that. So who are the biggest
Bill
lobbyists?
Gates.
Yeah, exactly. It all gets back to these people under altruism and philanthropy. Go ahead, plant this. Go fence to fence on rapeseed oil because that's good for us. And it ends up in our food supply. It ends up in our fuel supply. the incentive drives this. It's like, oh, right, well, we're making a shit ton of money out of this because we can put it in literally every food substance under the guise it's healthy for you because you're being half-truthed into believing that breakfast cereal somehow is good for you. Like, oh, my goodness. Adults are sitting down at a table in the morning and pouring dried crap into a bowl and then pouring white water onto it and thinking they're being healthy. It's incredible that we got here. And that's what keeps us sick.
Yes.
Because now you got diabetes. And so, okay, that's fine. We got a subscription plan for you for life, just to keep you barely alive. And then you just unravel it all. And it's the fiat incentives at every single part. And, you know, some people are, oh, you conspiracy theorists, you think it's this dark overlords. You know, it's like, just follow the money, the broken money. Follow the broken money.
Exactly.
Follow the fiat currency incentives. And, you know, Munger said this, and, you know, I'm not a fan of his in any way, shape or form. Show me the incentives and I'll show you the behavior. Is exactly right. The incentives right now, like how much money can we make out of the next great big thing to cure this disease that everybody is, you know, either about to get or suffering from as a result of the shit food they're eating, as a result of the shit diet advice that they've been given, as a result of the 4 years of medical school training that you've been gaslit into believing because we wrote the education system and we wrote the curriculum, agenda for a more of a better word. And so, Safe's brother, Ahmad Amus, he'll tell you this, 4 years at medical school, 20-minute subject on nutrition.
Oh, yeah.
And that's...
I had Professor Ian Brighthope on the show,
right.
And he's the biggest guru in Australia, and I would say even in the world, for vitamin C, vitamin D, and nutrition, nutritional health and integrative health. And he says, I studied in med school for, I think, 7 years, and then another 4 years of that, and da-da-da. And I told them, I'm not subscribing to any of that. And he forked into a different path.
So to bring this full circle now back to what we started talking about with the contrails, chemtrails, cloud seeding, silver iodide, and all of this kind of stuff.
That's what we breathe.
Right? That's what lands on the floor.
And
that's
goes
what
into
grows
the soil.
from the soil.
Exactly.
That's what the animals eat. If you're actually eating animals, or maybe you're not, it doesn't matter.
Goes into our water supply.
Or everything. And I still hadn't grokked all of that. And it was a friend of mine, again, on Twitter, Rickstar72. I think he might have changed his handle now. A South African guy. Grew up in a South African farming community.
Right.
And he was like, yeah, dude, like, you know, they've been doing this for years. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, start back up. What are you talking about? He's like, yeah, I was growing up. I remember, like, you know, 5, 10, 15 years of age, whatever. The insurance companies would pay private companies to go out and seed the clouds to make it rain so there wasn't a drought, so they didn't have to pay out on any failed crops, which the farmers had taken insurance on. Fiat clown world, again. So I'm like, oh, shit. So you're telling me they do have this technology? It's like, man, I'm telling you, there's a whole business. And that's when I started really looking into it. And, and then, like, it all clicked with Jack when he was talking about light and how we're being de-engineered and how it affects everything and blah, blah, blah. It's like,
you remember in our little group on Twitter, I told you guys about the light thing. And I looked at it also from a spiritual perspective, because the light helps our DNA evolve. The light helps us develop our consciousness and ascend into a higher consciousness and operate on higher frequencies. And if we're deprived of light, our DNA will continue to be what's called, you know, in our cells, we have 85 to 90% junk DNA, what they call it. It's not junk, obviously. It's undeciphered DNA. We're the most amazing machine that exists.
Yep.
And we haven't even tapped into 85 to 90% of our abilities. Think of how many superpowers people can have. You know, why do we have those X-Men movies?
Right.
It is science fiction, right? But you do get people with all these abilities that can telepathically read minds, that can see things, that can hear things. And this is not in the 5 senses that people taught us that that's what the world and our life and our reality is limited to. This is outside of that. This is higher. And I don't think that they want us to be better than where they managed to get us so far. So when people say, just like you said before, that there are no evil people sitting there around a table going, hoo, ha, 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 I think that, okay, maybe there aren't on a regular basis, but there is some grand plan out there. You know, there's Agenda 2030 exists not because they love humanity, but because they want to take us through a journey to get to a transhumanistic reality where our bodies are like comprised of a bit of technology and then biology, right? Why Benjamin Netanyahu is so proud of making Israel the next pioneer of biotechnology. He said that he's now working on a new project, creating the biggest genetic database out of Israel to give that to pharma companies and regulators around the world in order to develop the next best medicines.
And you have Harari as well.
And we have Yuval Noah Harari. It almost feels to me like Israel is the proper experiment lab of the world. We're like the little place where a lot of things are being tested on and coming out of. And it's all in a disguise of we're pioneers. We have the best tech. We're innovators, a startup nation. I've been part of Startup Nation for almost 15 years. I know how it works. There is a lot of innovation. There are perfectly smart people in Israel, but the incentive structure and the hiding of information from these people and getting them to have a very narrow view of life and a set of beliefs that will match the institution or the global powers in a perfect way is just unbelievable. So, again, I went on a tantrum.
No, I love it. Yeah, it's
Let's go back to chemtrails.
Yeah. I just hope, just look up, right?
Just look up.
Yep, just look up and think. Anybody over the age of 35, 40, like, just go back to when you were a kid. And, the easiest way to shoot people down is, oh, there's more air traffic these days. Yeah. It's like, oh, they've always had the exhaust fumes and stuff. It's like, yeah, they do. Like, you see them and then they disappear. Not these huge ones that streak across the sky and then hang in the air for 10 hours and slowly spread and join together. That is something that needs discussing.
Right.
Sensibly.
Right. And have you seen that there is a trend recently where mainstream media is starting to talk about those things and normalizing them?
Normalizing it as geoengineering and we're going to save the planet.
Right. I was pleasantly surprised to see that
it's almost as if
progression.
Now they've got to get ahead and admit.
Yeah, reveal, because they're taking it probably to the next level. Or they're seeing people like us. We're not the only ones, of course, but they're seeing people like us talking and starting to steer the pot, and they don't like it, and so they want to be prepared and have we're doing it, but it's great for you, and you have marine cloud brightening technologies out of California. This is great. We're doing an experiment with this university, and we're testing it, and it's great for you, and don't worry. Is it dangerous? No, not at all. On the studio there. Huh?
It's insane.
They're smiling and CNN.
And well, after the floods across the Middle East, right? The
Dubai.
Dubai and Oman, in particular, and we were tweeting about it. Like, these guys were cloud seeding. Yep. Yep. And then 1 year earlier, there's reports and videos of the guys signing the contract to buy $100 million worth of equipment to cloud seed over Dubai to make it greener, and it was celebrated. And then all of a sudden, bam, poof. More than 10 years worth of rain, whatever the statistic was, hits Dubai. So what happens? Tourists get trapped and completely, stranded for days without potable drinking water. People's property is destroyed, damaged. People lose their cars.
The airport was closed down.
Airport, right. How much damage to that airport? How much damage to all of the infrastructure? How much, loss of life. People died in both countries. Then complete denial. No, we didn't. No, we didn't do it that day.
It's climate change.
It's climate change. And you're like, so Balaji, very well-known ex-Coinbase investor, starts tweeting about how it's good. It's a good
cloud
thing.
seeding.
It's a good thing. We can terraform our planet if we're ever going to get... And all of this kind of narrative. And then I'm like, what on earth? And then 2 weeks later, it's announced that he's one of the investors in Rainmaker.
Oh.
That raised like $6 million to fly drones up into clouds to seed them with silver iodide, because cloud seeding is going to lift us into, like it's going to save us all. Decentralized water, this guy's talking about. He went on Pump's show to talk about it. It's incredible.
And we're helping Mother Nature because
Yep.
she needs our help.
It's delusional.
It's delusional. We're playing God, and the amount of hubris is horrible, and it's going to backfire. It is backfiring already with all these weather events that we see as a result of it.
And so, like, 1953, I think it was, there's a town in the UK called Lynmouth, down in the west side of the southwest in Devon, Dorset, I believe. Just flash flood overnight, scores of people dead, property, the whole village just completely wiped out. Was it climate change back in those days in 1953? Did we have that? I didn't have that excuse. But then, of course, documents get released X amount of years later. And sure enough, it was an RAF secret cloud seeding project.
The report of the UN that I analyzed, you remember that one in the article I wrote? It admits that once you start tinkering with the weather like that, you can get really severe floods, droughts, and other climate events, especially in places where they mentioned the Middle East. They mentioned different areas around the world that are prone to be more susceptible to these crises because of those kind of phenomena. If people continue to think that this is a conspiracy theory and they don't bother to go see that the UN Climate Committee have launched a report and that there is so much material out there from global organizations showing you that these programs, these projects are running. Our friend Lewis Brackpool in the UK has done fantastic work in revealing some of that information, those documents, this historical data that is now resurfacing through Freedom of Information Act requests that he made in the UK to show how much money is going into it, what kind of projects are running. It's all happening. All you have to do is just take down your guard. What's going to happen if you're going to say, okay, I'm open to hearing that someone is messing with my weather, climate, and health, because this is related to our health.
Absolutely. And again, I'm going to draw on Jack's talk yesterday. Like, what's the point of having Bitcoin if you don't have your health?
Right.
And if your health is being tinkered with and you're being socially engineered,
what good is your Bitcoin?
get angry. Stand up. What good is your Bitcoin? Because this is my health, this is my kids' health. And it's undeniable. We've been force-fed food that is not good for us, medicines that are not good for us, and the weather, as much as it triggers people, is being tampered with under the guise of climate change. And by the way, it's your fault, you poor little peasant human. That's you shouldn't be driving your car. And the messaging is just so damn strong that people that are pulling me aside, you're going to ruin your reputation. I'm like,
it's okay.
What? Reputation?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, ego death.
Exactly.
Is called ego death, Jeff Booth's fund, because
it's not about me
there's
anymore.
There's been a death of ego there.
Yes.
So ruin my reputation. What does that mean? What, like, I don't have the ego to worry about, I might lose a few followers or a few listeners from the podcast. That's fiat thinking.
Yes.
And if I see something wrong in the world, I want to be able to speak up and say, this is what I've seen and this is what I truthfully believe or have uncovered or have learned from you or Lewis. I remember when he made that Freedom of Information Act and he told us about it on the little group. And then he's like, whoa, guys, this is going to take me weeks. And so he was just hitting the bullet points of all of these things. And that was a 30-minute long video.
Yeah.
And one of the things that he found was this company Silver Linings
Yes.
out of the US,
Yes.
which is not for profit, whatever, you know, blah, 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 usual thing. Hide behind a 501c, I guess, and then get all this altruistic philanthropic money so that people don't have to pay tax on it, which was all set up, by the way, back in the day with Rockefeller, and that's how the General Education Board all came to be. Yeah, that company has sent $200,000 to the UK Met Office.
Mm-hmm. What is it?
Why?
Mm-hmm.
Why does the UK Met Office need money
From a company.
from a company based in the US
Uh-huh.
for what? Like to pay salaries? Like, yeah, we're struggling with headcount. We just need a little bit, you know, to get us by, keep the lights on. Like, no one's that dumb. So what is the incentive? Why is there that money being sent across to the UK Met Office? And I just had to start following their Twitter just to see the kind of messaging that they're putting out. And oh my God, it's just absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah.
They reported that May was like one of the hottest Mays of all time on planet Earth in the UK. And I called up my parents and I'm like, do you see that? And they're like, what? It's been shit.
Yeah.
And so there you just see all of this clown world.
It's all related to climate, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
For people who don't know, it's just that the official narrative is that we are covering your skies with a blanket so that we can cool down Earth in about 1 degree Celsius temperature, because we're mimicking the way that volcanoes work. And
This is the science.
yeah, that's the science that they're mimicking.
And Lewis brought this up as well. The hand-drawn kind of professor mega brains, like, yeah, okay, volcano goes off over here, volcanic ash goes across here. We know that lowers, so we can mimic that. Great idea. Thanks, PhD funding.
All over the world.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Take it everywhere.
And then Bill Gates picks up on it, and he terms it, or somebody termed it, solar radiation modification.
Yes.
And this is how we're going to deliver it, and blah, blah, blah. It's all there. It's even on
SRM
Wikipedia.
Yes, it's all there in Wikipedia everywhere. And SRM is a group of technologies. There are many ways of doing that.
Yep.
We can paint rooftops. We can put mirrors in
Space.
in space.
Insanity.
We can use planes. We can use ships.
Yep.
This is big.
Mm-hmm.
People don't realize that. Okay, what a great Bitcoin podcast that is.
That was
Okay, I
But
want to thank you.
it is related because,
It is related,
you know,
of course.
if you, what I love Canute for this saying, what's the point of having fuck you money if you don't say fuck you?
Thank you.
Canute,
Thank you.
my brother, said that. and
Exactly.
he nailed it.
Exactly. And people have to say a few more and do something about it. Go support Lewis for doing the work he's doing in the UK, you know? Go sign a petition. Go launch an FOI
Great
request.
point, actually. Lewis isn't a Bitcoiner.
No.
He's an independent UK journalist
Yep.
that is like seeing something up.
By the way, he's receiving sats.
I
now.
know.
Yeah.
I keep telling
Good
him,
work.
you got to put your LNURL under your Twitter profile there, and we'll
Good
get
work.
him. We'll keep pushing him. We'll
Yeah.
get him there.
Yeah.
Because he sees the truth, and so does Ahmad.
Ahmed Malik, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, education. With a little bit of time we have left. On Ahmed's podcast, you talked extensively about it. And by the way, it's a brilliant episode that I really recommend people to go watch on Doc Malik's podcast. But you're basically talking about the board mission statement, the Board of Education
Yeah.
mission statement, funded by the Rockefellers. Can you
Yeah.
give people like a bit of an insight into that world so that they can go and continue researching about it?
Absolutely. And I remember,
The manifest there was amazing.
I remember Ahmad read it out on the podcast.
Yes, no,
I-
it's brilliant.
I didn't have the Wi-Fi, and it was actually better that he read it out because he has that sexy Scottish accent, so which all the ladies love. That's why that is brilliant, because my wife will listen to
Cracking.
the podcast, and my kids.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when it's in the car, we're doing long journeys. I'll be like, oh, let's put on a podcast. Like, no, we don't want to hear any Bitcoin podcasts. I'm like, no, I found a new guy. I think you find him quite interesting. And they love his accent. And so we get through like a 3-hour-long podcast with him.
Nice.
And actually, you might have to do it because I don't think I've got
Internet?
internet here.
So
Go to General Education Board, Wikipedia.
General
Yeah.
Edu.
And as you do that, I'll give the viewers a quick background of how this come to be. So many people watching this, they're Bitcoiners. They're probably aware of the fact that in 1910, a secret meeting took place on Jekyll Island where 6 or 7 guys got together to hash out the Federal Reserve System. And then it took them 3 years to go on a dog and pony show around America to, propagandize everybody and anybody into believing that, a central banking system was the right way to go. And we're pretty familiar with the kind of names that are, associated with that. Now, in 1902, this had already taken place, this kind of game plan, but in relation to education. Mm-hmm. And if we take it back to the end of the 1800s, a guy by the name of Horace Mann, and by the way, John Taylor Gatto is the person that I learned all of this from, and the resource there is The Underground History of the American Education System. Mm-hmm. People should get a copy of that book before that is either mass burnt or just quietly never printed again. Mm-hmm. And he hashed all of this out. And 1902, secret meeting, 6 or 7 men in a room to discuss how to create the education system. Because what Horace Mann had discovered from his visits across to Europe to visit Prussia, to study the Prussian, which was a separate state of Germany, to check out, why is their military so good, and why is, what's going on with their education system. And France and England, being the biggest coal-faring nations of the time, they had very strict education systems running, and they wanted to know, what can we do in America? America was disparate. America was full of entrepreneurism because people had to, right? Mm-hmm. It was a new country. Mm-hmm. It was being built out. And you had people, all of these different races, religions from all across vast swathes of Europe coming. They wanted to get everybody in lockstep, the monopolists of the day. And they got together, they created this meeting, and out of that meeting came the philosophy, like the white paper. And I don't know if you found it, if you want to, yeah.
In our dream, we have limitless resources, and the people yield themselves with perfect docility to our molding hand.
All right, that's the first sentence.
Wow.
In our dream.
Wow. We have limitless resources, and the people yield themselves with perfect docility to our molding hand. We do whatever the fuck we want with them.
That's the first line of the General Education Board's mission statement of how are we going to create this whole great big system. That was their dream. Please read the next sentence. It gets better.
The present educational conventions fade from their minds, and, unhampered by tradition, we work our own goodwill upon a grateful and responsive rural folk.
Complete and utter lunacy. Like social engineering and eugenics on a different level.
Fade from their minds. We somehow managed to get them to stop thinking about
any conventional educational techniques that they would have brought with them from the countries from which they were arriving. We have to gently, the language is nice and fluffy, right? But that has to fade from their minds.
This is like Men in Black when you go. We shall not try to make these people or any of their children into philosophers or men of learning or men of science. We have not to raise up from among them authors, editors, poets, or men of letters. God forbid. We are not. No, they're supposed to stay dumb.
Yeah.
We shall not search for embryo great artists, painters, musicians, nor lawyers, doctors, preachers, politicians, statesmen, of whom we have an ample supply. We don't need more of those. There are enough of the thinking people out there. We need dumb, complying slaves.
Obedient.
That's what I'm reading.
Yeah.
The task we set before ourselves is very simple, as well as a very beautiful one, to train these people as we find them to a perfectly ideal life just where they are. So we will organize our children into a little community and teach them to do in a perfect way the things their fathers and mothers are doing in an imperfect way, in the homes, in the shops, and on the farm. We will indoctrinate. That's what this says.
Our children is the language that they use.
Yes, our children. It's communism, right?
Yeah.
It's like in the kibbutz in Israel. You don't have, the kids don't grow up with the parents in the house. They grow in the kids' house. And they're the kids of the kibbutz.
It's an attack on the family. It's designed this way. And it says, what their mothers and fathers are doing in an imperfect way. So you're seen to be completely imperfect. If you procreate, then it's up to us to raise the children, and that is what the state schooling system does. And that's why the education system has been set up in such a way to create hormonal malice, I guess, normies that aren't going to challenge the system, and they're not going to ask these questions because depending on which country you live in France, it's from the age of 3 that school becomes, in air quotes, mandatory or compulsory.
Yes.
People don't question. They don't question. And this has only been like 3 or 4 generations. If you look at the timeline of human history, like we got day dot at this end of the scale, and we have 2024 at this end of the scale. Like the education system that have all been subjected to, that experiment started taking place right here. Everything before that was pretty much natural learning, actual learning, not being, locked up into a small.
What have we been subscribed to in the last 100 years or more?
Indoctrination.
What is this? Indoctrination.
Yeah. And
this is like The Handmaid's Tale. I haven't watched the whole series, but the woman is supposed to just bring kids, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And then if someone else takes care of the rest.
Yeah. And so, you can see like the hand of communism in there.
Yes.
There's no disputing that. And it's all under the guise of free education is a human right.
So who's behind the mission board, the General Education Board?
Yeah, if you go to the top there, it will tell you who funded it.
John D. Rockefeller.
Yeah, $1 million.
1902. Donated an initial $1 million, equivalent to $35 million in 2023.
Could you imagine?
Cause.
Imagine that amount of money. No state could ever, in those days, could have ever dreamt of having that amount of money to roll out like a state incentive, a government.
And that was integrated into the formal government education.
That's the state education system.
Fucking
hell. Yeah. And then everything else is,
but it's philanthropy.
Oh, it's philanthropy, of course. And by the way, you don't have to pay tax. It's tax deductible. That's how I think Frederick T. Gates was the person he hired to set that whole kind of thing up. And it's no relation. No, it's not.
No? Okay.
I could see where your eyes were going, and I checked it out myself.
Okay.
But no. Yeah, that's why you have these universities in the U.S. that have multi-hundred million, sometimes billion-dollar endowment funds. Because all this money just comes in because it can be tax deductible, and it's nice to be philanthropic and donate to the education of the next generation and whatever else. And that's where the indoctrination really kicks into gear. I mean, give me a boy until the age of 7 and I'll show you the man. Like this is like the kind of thinking here. You take them at such a young age. By the time you get them up through the 4 years of the university system, we're all very much aware of like the agendas that get pushed through the 18 to 22-year-olds and the infiltration that goes on in there, and look at all of the wokeness and craziness that's going on now. That's just the cherry on the cake. And when you look at if you've captured like the medical system, for example, you've written Same characters are all part of the American
Of
Medical
course.
Association. So you get to write the curriculum.
And they also subsidized the universities
Yep.
when they wanted to use their oil from just oil for transportation, oil for medicine.
That's how we get the allopathic medicine.
Exactly.
And that's why naturopaths and holistic healers were just completely and totally destroyed
Banned,
back in
yeah.
the 30s, I believe, that campaign took place.
Yep.
And
And it's the
Fiat.
same Rockefeller.
fiat monetary incentives, yep. And a handful of others, obviously.
Yes, of course.
You just follow that money, and all of the conspiracy theories, they just fall apart because
Yeah.
it's just there in front of you in paper. And it was a conspiracy, like 6 dudes in a room conspiring,
It's not a
theorizing.
theory. They actually rolled it out into existence.
It's a business plan, and it's a bloody good one, because look what they've created.
Yep.
Like
they
the
succeeded big
education
time.
system is the holy cow.
Yes.
Like the NHS system, is just a layer on top of that. And you've preordained yourself to be able to be the one to certificate this.
Right.
And you're the only one that I can give you a certificate for being a doctor, as long as you follow the curriculum that we've written out for you. And just how it happens that there's only 20 minutes of nutrition education in there, but don't worry about that. And how do you create a monopoly? Well, you make it very hard, right? 4 years of hell. So you get many dropouts. So the ones that are left are truly indoctrinated.
And they want it so bad.
Because of the sunk cost fallacy, and this is the
Yes.
PSYOP, it's like, okay, now you're going to be just basically a prescription writer and a legalized drug pusher for the pharmaceutical companies. Look at this conspiracy theorist, crazy guy sitting here. But that's what happens. And that's just following the money.
Wow, Daniel. Okay, so the book you said we should have a copy of to go deeper down into the education rabbit hole is called? What's
The
it?
underground history of the American education system.
Okay.
Because he goes all over the world and goes deep into, the characters that started that. But that's thick. That's a big book. So
Okay.
if you want a gateway drug,
Yes.
same author, John Taylor Gatto, who sadly passed, Weapons of Mass Instruction.
Nice.
And John was a state school teacher for 30 years. He won awards as being best teacher of New York State or whatever.
So he
Yeah.
knows the system from within.
But then something inside of him woke
Changed,
up
like
and
us.
changed
Yeah.
because he was open to it and he questioned, and he didn't like what his life had become and what he'd become a part of and what he was, what they were using him for. Because as a teacher in this system, you're just as stuck as the kids.
Of course, just like the doctors.
Yeah, you're
Yeah.
just as stuck because
Yeah.
you've been through the same programming, and it's really sick. And we need more people waking up. This is what we were
Yes.
talking about earlier. Just having the courage, like
courage.
Doc Malik, to say, "Hang on, I'm going to draw a line in the sand here and just drop a knee and just think, because nothing is making sense, and something inside of me, every bone in my body, every fiber of my." Myself is telling me, screaming at me, something's up, something's not right, something doesn't make sense. And we probably all went through that at some stage during school. That's called looking out the window because you're bored. Because, what am I doing here?
Yes.
How have I got to sit here for the next 5 hours or be with these group of people that I've just randomly been algorithmically placed with for the next 7 years? I don't like any of these people. It doesn't make any sense. Every fiber of your being would have been naturally fighting that. And there's so much trauma that we've been through. Detachment from very early age from the family, as they talk about, detach. And like countries such as France, the year you turn 3, so if imagine this, you've got a kid that's born in December, so the next year they turn 3, right? Off to school, January 3rd.
Yeah.
2 years of age,
So they can.
away from mum and dad. You can't program that as a toddler. You have no idea why you wake up one morning and then you're in a completely different weird building that's just full of strangers and your mummy's not there anymore. It's detachment. It's crazy. And it's my mission as part of, to educate people, as many people as I can, about how the money's broken and how Bitcoin is going to act as a store of value for you over time, over the next 10 years, and free you in a way that you've never, ever even considered possible in a lifetime. It's also my mission to, if we want to starve the beast, we cannot keep feeding it our children's hearts, souls, and minds. Has to stop. The line has to be drawn, and you have to say no. Made a conscious decision to have children, and these are our children, and it's my responsibility as a parent to do the best thing for that child, and sending it into a faceless institution to be force-fed whatever nonsense is coming through this agenda is not a responsible thing to be doing. And I hope more and more people start questioning that, and especially the young Bitcoiner families now that are having babies and bringing up children.
I hope so too. I hope so too. And on that note, as we're wrapping up, I want to ask you, how do you want to see the next couple of years unravel? How would you like to, what your dream, your vision, your ideal vision, your hope? Where do you draw your hope for the next 2 years?
Wow. I draw my hope always from the bright orange light that we've all managed to find. You were talking about earlier, light and dark. And light outshines good and evil. People want to go into that spiritual realm as well. Truth, it's Buddha, I believe. There are 3 things you can't hide: the sun, the moon, and the truth. They're trying to hide the sun.
Yes.
They're going to fail.
Yes.
Because you can't hide the sun, the moon, the truth. And, Bitcoin is truth. And with that will come the truth of everything else, all of these half-truths that we've been told. Gradually then suddenly, thank you, Parker, gradually then suddenly, people will wake up. It's inevitable. The human spirit is so strong, and people are going to realize that their misery, and that's not a good place to be in life. It's conversations like this, I hope, that brings people to question a few more strongly held beliefs, and perhaps do some extra digging into a few areas of their life and just change. And I want to see more educational content for Bitcoiners in particular, because I believe that is that's the tool that I can't believe we get to sit here and have these conversations.
I know.
We're at an inflection point in history that's going to be studied forevermore.
Yes.
And I'm here for it. And like you, I'm leaning into it, and incredible things are happening, and connections I thought I would never be able to make with people, not for monetary value or anything like that, but just conversations like this in particular. I'm sure you've experienced the same. So
100%.
That's my hope going forward. And thank you for inviting me on, and thank you to these guys for doing everything
For
back here
being
as well.
with us. And where can people follow you? Where's the best place?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter.
Yes.
I'm still on Twitter Maxi. I've not moved to calling it X yet.
Me too. And Nostr as well?
I am on Nostr as well. Yeah, so Twitter is Princey21M. And my Nostr is npub 4436. No, I don't know. Keep
That would have been
Nostr
hilarious
weird.
if you did.
Keep Nostr weird is what
Yes.
Rockstar told me the other day. I'm like, how do I get people? He's like, yeah, that'll come. Like, how do I upload a video? He's like, no, all in good time, But Nostr is,
nice.
I've leveled up on Nostr this weekend as well, and
Okay,
it feels as though I'm going to be going full Nostard as sooner rather than later.
Okay, good. And the book?
Choose Life is available on bitcoinbook.shop, which is run by Consensus Network.
And Once Bitten?
Once Bitten is across all platforms. I am uploading videos now. I didn't in the beginning because Lauren was 9 and I didn't want her on the YouTubes, but she's 13 now and she's happy to be, part of it. Doesn't mind her face being on. So yeah, the YouTube channel's slowly going to grow. There'll be more content moving over there, but please listen on Fountain app.
Yes.
But you'll find it on Spotify, Google Pods, Apple Pods. Yeah, it's all over the place.
Thank you so much for everything you're doing. Thanks for being who you are.
Thank you, Efrat. Appreciate it.